WhiteRabbit, it might be a bit of a basic app, basic application compared to WebAPI and Atlas, but it's actually also quite an exciting piece of software. It actually stretches the limits of Microsoft Excel, and it has Java methods that generate code, And in general, it's actually quite fun to play with the UI of such an existing app. So a lot you can learn by just contributing to this. Just like Anthony said, this is not about using WhiteRabbit or RabbitInAHat. There's quite good documentation on that, and actually a whole academy course as well, an Eden Academy course on using this tool. I will be talking about the code here. I will first give a brief introduction, then I'll dive into the code base. I will focus primarily actually on the release process, which I think is pretty important here to properly test your whole code. And then lastly, on how you can contribute to WhiteRabbit. I'll just breeze through this introduction. I think many of you will have seen WhiteRabbit before, because it's actually the start of your Odyssey journey. The start of the start, I even put here. Because WhiteRabbit will help you understand your source data by creating this WhiteRabbit scan report. And RabbitInAHat, it's like a companion app within WhiteRabbit that helps you to make a description of how your own CDM instance will be populated from the source data. So this is a screenshot of both WhiteRabbit and RabbitInAHat. And important to note here that they share one code base. As I said, WhiteRabbit outputs these Excel files listing all the tables in your source, the fields in your source, and actually the values in your source in a separate tab per table. And RabbitInAHat outputs an ETL specification, either as a Word document, an HTML document, or a Markdown document. A bit of background on the history. So it's actually an app from the early days of Odyssey. The first commits are from 2014. It was designed by Martijn Schumi, as many tools in the Odyssey community. But throughout the years, there have been 21 contributors to the code, of which one is actually a bot. So I would say 20 people have contributed. In the last few years, there have been 4 minor releases, and actually a major thing lately have been to add support to CDM version 5.4. No major features are being added at the moment. It's mainly maintaining the code repo, offer support to any issues that are opened, which they regularly are, and any bugs that might need fixing, or vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. So who is maintaining WhiteRabbit at the moment? Since a few years, somewhere beginning of 2019, the Hive has taken over the maintenance of WhiteRabbit. Actually under Eden, we're actually working a lot with Eden to add in new features in the beginning stages of that European consortium. There is no working group around WhiteRabbit. It's mainly myself and a colleague of mine, Joris, who, in contrast to me, is actually a really good Java architect. So he always reviews my code, and that's always very helpful. And that being said, we also maintain Usagi, another one of the Rabbit tools. They're called the 3 of these. Everything mentioned here in this presentation will also goes also for Usagi. It's very similarly set up. All right. So with that, let's dive into the code base. So just like the Web API, WhiteRabbit is a Java 8 application. And I've listed here a few of the major dependencies. So it's the Apache POI library to read and write Word and Excel files. It's a very important component. JWC to connect to their databases, to source databases, Java X-Swing and AWT to create the user interfaces, and again, just like WebAPI, Maven for package management. For contributing, actually no prior knowledge of any of these Java libraries is needed. Quick overview of the code base. This was actually refactored a few years ago to have separate modules. There are actually 3 main modules, and each contain a POM file, which are the Maven dependencies, a folder with the Java code, and resources. For instance, in RabbitInAHat, the OMOP CDM is included as a resource. Actually, several versions of the OMOP CDM are included. And there's actually a 4th small module that's nicknamed Leporidae, which actually is the family of, it's the name of the family of rabbits and hares. So it's a bit of fun fact there. If you might encounter that, that's where it comes from. Then I want to highlight a few of the functions within WhiteRabbit that, well, I think are fundamental here. So if you take a look at the code, we have a main file, WhiteRabbit main.java, which is the file we run the user interface from. And then all of the logic for the creating of a profile, the scan report, is in the source data scan. There all the values and statistics are computed. And that's where I spent actually a lot of time to add new features. Similarly, for RabbitInAHat, we have a lot of functions that deal with the user interface. And then there are functions to create the different output documents. And we have, again, this main file to run RabbitInAHat user interface. We have, I would say, quite a nice user documentation. This does describe the UI features and not the code. And it's all migrated recently to github.io. And actually, I discovered there that we do have documentation on the documentation on how the documentation is generated. So if you're interested, that's there as well. All right, what I want to focus on really was the release process. Although we don't have a lot of developers working on WhiteRabbit, we have a thorough process to make sure that the package we release will work for everyone. As a bit of background, I just want to cover the branching model we're using. So we have a stable master branch, which is always on the latest release. We have a develop branch, which is the default merge target for new features. Then for every new feature, we'll create a feature branch, which is ideally linked to one issue that describes what has been implemented or what's being fixed. And this will merge into develop. And then we have release branches that we'll use in the release process. So this is the full release process, and I will go through this step by step. So the first step when releasing is to create this release branch, marking that with the version, and within that release branch, bump the version number to that current, that new version. And it actually has to be done in at least 5 places, the 4 POM files, and in the documentation itself to keep that aligned. The nice thing is then that you do see in the user interface itself, you will see the version number as well. And this release branch then pushed to GitHub. Then a pull request in the second step to master is created, and this is extensively reviewed. Here we'll also compile the binaries for both the WhiteRabbit app and the RabbitInAHat app. And then we go into integration testing or end-to-end tests. And for this, we have a whole script that basically touches upon every component of WhiteRabbit and RabbitInAHat. And this is very important to make sure that everything is still working. And here we have burned ourselves once. I think that's a nice story. We had a very simple release where we wanted to fix some vulnerabilities where we updated the dependencies, for instance, for the Apache POI libraries. We thought it was a simple dependency update, and we actually didn't go through the whole story here. Just make sure that the app was still launching and the main thing still worked. And then after releasing, the issues came flooding in. There was actually something changed in these dependencies such that the Word document was not generated correctly anymore from RabbitInAHat. So luckily, that was caught quite early on, and we could refer these changes and do another a quick fix on that release. But yeah, just that signifies that even very minor changes, it's very good to go through all these steps of the integration test. Seems like a lot of work, but it really guarantees then that things keep working. So after this test pass, hopefully, if not, you will make some fixes on this release branch. But if these pass, we'll merge the pull request to master. And then the next step is to create the release on GitHub based on this master branch. We'll give it a new tag. We'll add a new release notes in the releases section of GitHub, describing new features, any fixes that have been done for each of the two apps. And we attach the zip binaries to the release. And that asset is the actual output here that people will download and launch when they want to use this app. And then lastly, we also want to update the develop branch such that it is in sync again with the master branch. And then there we'll bump the version to the next snapshot version to signify that on the develop, we're in development. It's a non-released version. Last thing I want to mention on the release process that we don't have a set schedule to release. It's done at this moment at a bit ad hoc level. If we accumulated enough fixes or new features, then we'll create a new release. And of course, if there's any critical bugs, then we'll push for a new release on a short timeline. All right, then lastly, how to contribute. So what are we looking for in someone who wants to make some code for WhiteRabbit? Well, it's a great project actually to learn Java. It has a nice UI and you can play around with a bit of trial and error with the app. It's actually a really nice experience. It would be nice if you know a bit about different data models and different data types. It's nice to play around with this UI. And some SQL experience is also would be great, but also great to learn some SQL. And it's actually one of the few Odyssey tools where no OMOP CDM or statistical knowledge is needed. So it's actually a great starter project if you're new to Odyssey. But you actually can learn about the CDM, especially with RabbitInAHat, which has the CDM data model built in. And as I mentioned in the introduction, there are some nice challenges you can encounter while working on WhiteRabbit. For instance, we discovered that Microsoft Excel has some fundamental limitations. Like an Excel sheet name is limited to 31 characters. And we use the table name in the tabs. So what if the table name is longer than 31 characters? And truncating doesn't work always because then you get duplicate table names. And Excel won't allow that in your tabs. And also a sheet is limited to 16,000 columns. And this will create issues in your value profile, where every field is a new column, if you have thousands of fields in your source data. Doesn't occur a lot. Hopefully you will never encounter that, but it has happened. It has caused issues. But we have managed to make workarounds around that. In light of time, we'll skip the solution, but it was a very nice challenge. And the second one already mentioned, there is a piece in RabbitInAHat called the R test framework, which contains a Java method that generates R methods that generates SQL code. I'll tip my hat to Martijn, who I think originally developed that. On my next slide, I have a piece of that code. Please promise me to not run away screaming when I show that. And I will quickly go on again, but we have some Java. We have some R statements, and within those R statements, we have SQL. Yeah, that has blown my mind while working on that. But it was a nice challenge. So then, if you're still interested to work on WhiteRabbit, and it would be very, very welcome, how to get started? And I try to answer that with how did I get started when I started with working on WhiteRabbit? Well, first step is to just launch WhiteRabbit from the source code. So you have to clone the repo, open a project, ideally in an IDE. I use IntelliJ myself, and then just run the WhiteRabbit main or RabbitInAHat main.java. And let me see if I can just show that from the good example from Anthony, just giving a short live demo. So I have the WhiteRabbit main here. And with an IDE, it's actually quite straightforward. You can say everything is configured correctly. We can tell it to run WhiteRabbit. And of course, on my second screen, it has just opened. And there we have WhiteRabbit running. Right. Let me open the slide. There we go. A few side notes. You need to install the Maven dependencies from the POM, but IntelliJ will help there as well. And of course, this is running with an ID. And recently, we added some example input and output for WhiteRabbit. Both some test files that you can use as a first target to scan with WhiteRabbit, and also the output of WhiteRabbit that you might want to open in RabbitInAHat. So these are some examples that will get you set up quickly with WhiteRabbit. Then if you have that running, the next step is to try to change something in WhiteRabbit. Just play around, some trial and error, to see what in the code changes what in the UI. And let me see if I can demonstrate that. So let's say in WhiteRabbit, we want to change, add a new feature. So what we'll do is add a new tab here. Add a tab to the tab pane. Let's say my new feature. And we'll just for now create a empty panel. Always remember to add a semicolon to the end. And then we can rerun a WhiteRabbit. And now we have a new tab where you can implement your new feature. Then that way you can interactively try out a few things. If that's a success, then you can choose an issue on GitHub to actually implement a new feature that was requested. Let me launch PowerPoint again. Here we are. And there are quite a lot of issues open on GitHub at the moment. I've tried to label them all, whether they concern WhiteRabbit, RabbitInAHat, whether they are an enhancement or a bug. And I labeled a few with good first issue. And I've got 3 examples here submitted by 3 different people. These are actually quite small enhancements. They're waiting to be implemented. Yeah, so these would be great for someone to pick up. On a larger scale, I want to highlight this issue opened by Adam Black, where we actually need some more collaborators to implement this. It has to do with speeding up WhiteRabbit. That would let the database do more of the processing to create a data profile. And there actually we need people with access to different relational database management systems. So that will be greatly appreciated. Yeah, if people can help out there. And that might actually warrant to set up a working group around it. If people join there or if people are interested. So we hope to see you soon. If you want to help out, reach out to us on the WhiteRabbit GitHub or on the Odyssey forums, or email me directly if you have any questions. That's what I want to say. Are there any questions right now?
I really enjoyed your demonstration of wrapping SQL in R in Java. That was really fun. I only wish you could spend more time on that page. Any questions for Maxim?
I have a question.
Hey.
Hi, Maxim. So thanks very much for this awesome presentation, and it was certainly a trip down memory lane for me. But I'm happy you took my code and turned it into something that the community can use. I have a more of a question around the code. So I know that, and you mentioned it, that Eden is actually the one currently basically footing the bill for all of this. And I was just wondering how that works for them, because I remember originally there was a question like how they could get credit for basically making this possible. And so could you explain a little bit about how that works, how they are basically still motivated to keep paying for this?
Right. Yeah, so these tools are actually crucial. So together with Usagi as well, are crucial in onboarding new data partners in Eden. So we're setting up this European network of data partners using OMOP. And of course, for that, we want to guide them in this journey to convert their data to OMOP. So there, these tools are crucial. We're also during the data partner call, we're training them in the use of this tooling. So these are actually quite important for us, and that's also why we want to support these tools, implement any new features that might arise or issues from these during these trainings and the usage during these data partner calls. Yeah, so that's why we wanted to support these tools.
Okay, but I was just surprised, like I didn't even see an Eden logo on the GitHub page. So I thought that would have been something that Eden would have wanted, but okay.
I'll write that down, Martijn.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think it's very important, just to close on this point. I think it's just important that people that contribute get credit, and also institutions that contribute get credit. So I was just curious, like how we could make sure that happens and continues to happen.
Yeah, but I think it's the power of open source. As in, we get a pre-made application, we use that, and we continue to work on that. So I think it's a bit of give and take there. But stamping it with Eden, I will take that to the work package, see if that's something we would like to do.
Paul, I think Ajit had his hand up. Ajit, did you have a quick question for Maxime before I get started?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Just about, I posted in the chat about the SQL dialects that are supported in WhiteRabbit. is that pulling from SQL render, or like for Spark, for instance, do we need to like add a specific Spark route in WhiteRabbit?
Yeah, good question. So it's actually not. And that, for instance, SQL render is not supporting MySQL, but WhiteRabbit does, because the source system could be MySQL. So it's actually completely disconnected. I think we also support Teradata, but Google BigQuery was recently added. So you need Spark has to be implemented separately if that's required. Yeah.
Okay. I'll raise a pull request for that because I think the connection string also we'd have to provide the expertise on that. So okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maxim.
Great.
Oh, I saw Barak's hand too. Sorry. Go ahead, Barak. Before we move off of this.
Yeah, hello. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a quick one for Maxim. On the SQL queries that are being generated, how do you ensure that they are optimized for performance? Because we have cases whereby users are running very heavy queries using the system. How do you try and ensure that such queries are well optimized to ensure that they are efficient and friendly to the?
I can be short. I can be short there. I think. Martijn, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're not. They're not optimized. They're made generic for more for all databases. For instance, there could be a order by random. I think is somewhere in the Postgres query, for instance, which is not quite optimal for a random subset of data. And this is a project actually we would like to take on. It was raised by Adam Black to optimize this, and that will require to make specific implementations per database management system.
Okay, sure. Yeah, maybe I can reach out and we can see how we can assist. And
help is very much would be great. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.